Alright, I'm gonna keep going on my videos on the Civil War. I'm just kind of touching up on. I'm doing some smaller videos on the things, well, regular videos on what happened before the war and kind of what has led to cause it. Some of the figures, the people, and some of that stuff. And I'll be doing a video talking about some good few famous abolitionists. But in this video, I want to talk about the Fugitive Slave Act. There's actually two of them, but there was one of them that is mostly important. There was a first Fugitive Slave Act that was in 1793. Basically, it authorized any kind of local government to return any slave that had escaped back to its owner. That's what the whole thing was about these acts. It was kind of mandating that any slave that had escaped be returned to the owner in the South, and that's kind of like that. And it also came with it that if you were to harbor a slave or try to help him or her escape, then there would be penalties upon you for helping them. This one was kind of a weaker one than the one in 1850, because in the one in 1850 there were some harsher penalties than there were in the one in 1793. There was some, I guess, dislike towards this, and I guess what I'm trying to touch on these videos that I'm doing about the Civil War, about the stuff that happened kind of before the war. I'm trying to just kind of highlight the tension between the North and the South, and not only the tension between the North and the South, but the tension between the states themselves. For instance, people in New York might have some kind of resentment towards people in Virginia, or people in Rhode Island might have some resentment for people in Massachusetts. There's just a lot of tension here, and I'm trying to highlight some of those things. And it's kind of centered around this big issue of slavery. Ever since the country became a nation, ever since it signed the Declaration of Independence and became its own country, and rather than no longer colonies, it was kind of, we had this issue of slavery that the country was basically divided upon, and nobody really agreed about it. But there's just kind of this thing that we kept tabled, that they kept tabled. They just didn't really deal with it. They kept making compromises as time approached 1860, and it kind of just proceeded from there, and sort of caused there was just a lot of tension around that. So the Fugitive Slave Acts were basically trying to get property back to those who owned the property. People didn't really like this act. 1850, that one repealed the one of 1793. There were harsher penalties for those who harbored slaves and tried to help them escape. It was a very controversial law because it was a north to south return of slaves, and many slaves they actually succeeded in their escaping. There's been a lot of abolitionists like Harriet Tubman, John Brown, Sojourner Truth, people like that who have helped, created tunnels underground or done some other thing to help slaves escape towards the north and even possibly to Canada. John Brown had a tunnel underground which allowed him to try to get slaves to Canada. Some of the northern states wanted to get around this law and sort of try to not have to abide by it. So some of the states created something that's called the personal liberty law, which is that um, um, that that certain jurisdictions needed um, a jury trial before this Fugitive Slave Act could be enforced properly, and the whole thing was about this. Both of the versions of the acts, they weren't really that well enforced. The North was still the North, and the various abolitionists were helping slaves escape, and this law was very badly enforced. We have the Prigg versus Pennsylvania decision of 1842, which was the Supreme Court's decision ruling that states didn't need to aid in hunting down escaped slaves, which, as you can imagine, by the North is kind of a good decision of the Supreme Court, that they don't have to help in returning slaves back to their owners. So there was a lot of things like personal liberty laws and different things that the people of the North and people who disliked this law could use to get around it, and it was badly enforced. And this was just like kind of an act that kind of showed, in my opinion, has kind of highlighted the tension between the North and the South, and even the states themselves. So I'm going to be doing some videos on the Missouri Compromise of 1850, Kansas-Nebraska Act, and about some abolitionists soon.